The birthday cake sat there like a loaded weapon, 43 candles flickering in the dim light of my mother's dining room. I should have known Isla was planning something. She'd been fidgeting all evening, checking her phone, whispering with her best friend Janet in the corner like they were plotting a coup. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" Isla's voice cut through the chatter of 20-odd relatives and friends gathered around Mom's table. She stood up, smoothing down her designer dress, the one that cost more than most people's rent. "I have some wonderful news to share." My mother, Eleanor, gripped the edge of the table. She never liked surprises. Neither did I, come to think of it. Something cold settled in my stomach as I watched my wife of 8 years beam at the assembled crowd. "Ethan and I are going to have a baby," Isla announced, placing her hand dramatically over her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The room erupted. Gasps, squeals, congratulations flying from every direction. My cousin Sarah nearly knocked over her wine glass. Uncle Pete started clapping. Even my normally stoic mother cracked a smile. But I just sat there, staring at my wife with what I hoped looked like surprise rather than the growing rage building in my chest. Because you see, there was one tiny problem with Isla's announcement. I'd had a vasectomy 5 years ago. "Congratulations, honey," I said, standing up slowly. My voice was steady, controlled. Years of military training had taught me to keep my cool under pressure. "This is certainly unexpected news." Isla beamed at me, probably thinking she'd pulled off the performance of her life. Janet was smirking behind her wine glass. They thought they had me cornered. "Actually, before we celebrate," I continued, reaching for the manila folder I'd placed under my chair earlier, "I'd like everyone's attention for just a moment." The room quieted. Mom's eyes narrowed. She knew that tone. It was the same one I'd used when I caught my brother stealing from her purse 20 years ago. "Isla, darling, I'm a little confused about this pregnancy announcement." I opened the folder and pulled out a stack of medical documents. "You see, I have some paperwork here that might complicate things." Her smile faltered just slightly. "Ethan, what are you—" "These are medical records from Dr. Patterson's office," I said, holding up the documents for everyone to see. "From 5 years ago, March 15th to be exact, 6 months before Isla and I got married." The room was silent now. You could have heard a pin drop on Mom's hardwood floors. "The procedure was a vasectomy," I announced calmly. "Permanent sterilization. Dr. Patterson is actually here tonight. He's Mom's neighbor, as you all know. Doc, would you mind confirming the effectiveness of this procedure?" Dr. Patterson, a gray-haired man in his 60s, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, Ethan, a properly performed vasectomy has a success rate of over 99.9%. It's considered permanent sterilization." "And you performed mine correctly, didn't you, Doc?" "Yes, of course. I also did your post-operative testing. You were confirmed sterile." I turned back to Isla, whose face had gone white as the birthday cake frosting. "So you can see my confusion, honey. How exactly does a sterile man father a child?" The silence stretched on forever. Janet had stopped smirking. Uncle Pete's mouth was hanging open. My mother was staring at Isla with the kind of look that could freeze hell over. "Ethan, I can explain," Isla started. "Oh, I'm sure you can," I said. "But first, I think everyone should know that my attorney has already prepared paternity test orders, just in case anyone was wondering about the biological father of this miraculous conception." That's when the phones came out. Sarah was recording. My cousin Mike was live streaming to Facebook. Even Mom's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, was fumbling with her smartphone camera. "The timeline is quite interesting," I continued, pulling out more documents. "My vasectomy was March 15th, 5 years ago. Our wedding was September 20th that same year. I told Isla about the procedure during our engagement. She said she was fine with adopting someday." Isla's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into her chair, staring at the medical records like they were a death sentence. "Of course," I said. "There is one other possibility. Maybe Isla found another way to get pregnant. Maybe she found someone who could give her what I apparently couldn't." Mom stood up abruptly. "Isla, I think you need to leave. Now." "Eleanor, please, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," Mom said coldly. "You've embarrassed yourself and insulted my son in my home. Get out." That's when my lawyer friend Tom stepped forward. He'd been unusually quiet all evening, sitting in the corner with his own manila envelope. "Isla," Tom said formally, "you're being served." He handed her a thick packet of papers. "Separation agreement and divorce petition, filed this afternoon." The room exploded into chaos. Isla's sister was shouting. Janet was trying to defend the indefensible. Uncle Pete was demanding to know if this was some kind of joke, but I just stood there, watching my wife's world crumble around her. 8 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Her trying to pass off another man's baby as mine, probably hoping to trap me into staying while she continued her affair. "How long?" I asked quietly, cutting through the noise. "What?" Isla whispered. "How long have you been cheating on me?" She couldn't even look me in the eye. That told me everything I needed to know. The party was over. Guests started filing out, some offering awkward condolences, others just eager to escape the drama. Within 20 minutes, it was just me, Mom, Isla, and Janet left in the dining room. "You bastard!" Janet hissed at me. "You planned this whole thing." "I planned to find out the truth," I said. "Isla's the one who decided to announce her pregnancy at my mother's birthday party. I just provided some context." Isla finally found her voice. "Ethan, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling." "With whose baby, Isla? Because it sure as hell isn't mine." She had no answer for that. After they left, Isla crying, Janet muttering threats under her breath, I helped Mom clean up. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, stacking plates and blowing out candles. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "About the affair? 6 months. About the pregnancy? She told me this morning. Said she wanted to announce it tonight to make it special. And you've been planning this ever since?" I shrugged. "I believe in being prepared." Mom nodded approvingly. "Your father would be proud. He never did like that girl." As I walked to my truck, I found a note tucked under the windshield wiper, scrawled in angry handwriting. "You'll regret this, you bastard. This isn't over." I recognized the writing. Calvin Morrison, used car salesman and apparently my wife's baby daddy. We'd never been formally introduced, but I'd seen him around town. Cocky little weasel with slicked back hair and a gold chain. I crumpled up the note and smiled. Calvin was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. The next morning, my phone was buzzing like a hornet's nest. News travels fast in a town of 30,000, especially when it involves public humiliation and infidelity. By the time I got to my security company office, half the town knew about Isla's fake pregnancy announcement. "Boss, you've got about 20 missed calls," said Danny, my office manager and former Army buddy. "Local news, couple of gossip bloggers, and your mother-in-law called 3 times. She sounded upset." "I bet she did." I poured myself coffee and settled behind my desk. "Any business calls?" "Actually, yeah. Mrs. Peterson wants to hire us to follow her husband. Says if you can catch a cheating wife, maybe you can catch a cheating husband too." I had to laugh. Nothing like a public scandal to drum up business. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Isla's office. "Ethan?" Her voice was small, defeated. "We need to talk." "I think we said everything we needed to say last night." "Please, I'm at the office. Can you come over? I can explain everything." "Explain what? How you've been screwing Calvin Morrison for the past 6 months? How you thought you could pass his kid off as mine? Which part needs explaining exactly?" Silence. Then, "How did you know about Calvin?" "Isla, I run a security company. Finding things out is literally my job." More silence. I could hear her crying. "The whole town knows," she whispered. "It's all over Facebook. Someone posted the video from last night. I can't show my face anywhere." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on your husband." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice. Multiple choices, actually. Every time you met Calvin at the Riverside Motel. Every time you lied to me about working late. Every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to love me while carrying another man's baby." She was sobbing now. Part of me, a very small part, felt bad for her. But the larger part, the part that had been humiliated and betrayed, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Ethan, please. My boss is furious. The partners are talking about suspension. I could lose my job. That's not my problem anymore. And Calvin won't return my calls. He's avoiding me." Of course he was. Calvin Morrison was a coward and opportunist. He was probably thrilled to have a married woman on the side, but the minute it became public knowledge, he'd run for the hills. Still not my problem. "What do you want from me?" she asked desperately. "I want you to sign the divorce papers. I want you to move out of my house, and I want you to stay away from my family." "It's our house." "Check the deed, Isla. It's in my name, bought with my money before we got married. You've got no legal claim to it." I hung up and turned to Danny. "I need you to do me a favor. Calvin Morrison works at Morrison Used Cars on 5th Street. I want to know everything about him, where he lives, who he's married to, what he drives, where he drinks, everything." Danny grinned. "On it, boss." By afternoon, I had a complete dossier on Calvin Morrison. 34 years old, married to Linda Morrison for 12 years, 2 kids aged 8 and 10. Drove a restored 1967 Camaro that he babied like a newborn. Lived in a modest ranch house on the south side of town. Drank at Murphy's Tavern most Friday nights. Most interesting of all, Linda Morrison had no idea about the affair. According to Danny's research, she was a sweet woman who worked part-time at the elementary school and volunteered at the animal shelter. I drove to Morrison used cars around closing time. Calvin was alone on the lot, probably trying to avoid going home and facing questions about the local gossip. He saw me coming, and his face went pale. "We need to talk," I said. "I got nothing to say to you," Calvin replied, but his voice shook. "That's funny, because you had plenty to say in your note last night." He glanced around nervously. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." "Then you shouldn't have been sleeping with my wife. She told me you two were separated. For 6 months? While we were still living together? Still wearing wedding rings? Come on, Calvin. Even you're not that stupid." He backed up against a pickup truck. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from Isla. I want you to stay away from me. And I want you to think real hard about what your wife Linda would say if she found out about your extracurricular activities." Calvin's eyes went wide. "You wouldn't. Try me." I left him standing there in his car lot, probably wondering how his life had gotten so complicated so fast. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. That evening, I drove to the Riverside Motel. It was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for cheap affairs, hourly rates, no questions asked, probably hadn't been updated since the 1970s. I talked to the desk clerk, a bored-looking kid with too many piercings. "Yeah, I remember them," he said after I showed him photos of Isla and Calvin. "Came in maybe twice a week for the past few months, always paid cash, always room 12. She was real paranoid about being seen." "You got security cameras?" "Sure do. Keep the footage for 90 days in case of insurance claims." "How much for copies of the footage from the past month?" The kid looked around nervously. "I don't know, man. That seems like..." I pulled out $500 bills. "How about now?" 20 minutes later, I had a thumb drive full of security footage showing Isla and Calvin entering and leaving the motel together. Timestamps, clear faces, undeniable evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, or you'll be sorry." I texted back, "Is this Calvin? Because if it is, you might want to check your wife's Facebook page in about 10 minutes. I didn't actually post anything to Linda Morrison's Facebook page. I'm not a monster. But Calvin didn't need to know that. The threat was enough to keep him rattled and looking over his shoulder. By the time I got home, there were 3 cars in my driveway. Isla's BMW, Janet's Mercedes, and a rusted-out Honda I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I could see them sitting around my kitchen table like they were planning a war. I walked in through the front door like I owned the place, which, legally speaking, I did. "Ladies," I said pleasantly, "having a strategy session?" Janet looked up with pure hatred in her eyes. "You destroyed her life." I think Isla did that herself when she decided to cheat on me. She made one mistake. 6 months of mistakes. Twice a week at the Riverside Motel. Room 12. Want to see the security footage. The third woman, who I now recognized as Isla's sister Karen, spoke up. "You can't just throw her out on the street." "Watch me." Isla had been quiet this whole time, but now she looked up with red, swollen eyes. "Ethan, I'm pregnant. I can't just..." "With another man's baby. Not my responsibility." The law says I have no obligation to support another man's child. My lawyer was very clear about that." I walked to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, acting like this was the most normal conversation in the world. "You ladies need to wrap this up. I've got an early day tomorrow, and this is still my house." "You bastard," Janet hissed. "We're going to destroy you. Everyone in this town is going to know what kind of man you really are." "What kind is that?" "The kind who humiliates his pregnant wife in public. The kind who throws a woman out on the street. The kind who doesn't let people walk all over him," I interrupted. "Yeah, I can live with that reputation." After they left, more threats, more tears, more drama, I sat in my quiet house and planned my next move. Because Janet was right about one thing. This was war, and I intended to win. The war began in earnest the next morning. I woke up to find my security company's Google reviews flooded with 1-star ratings. Untrustworthy. Cruel to women. Would never hire this monster. All posted between midnight and 6 a.m., all from fake accounts. Janet's opening move. Predictable, but effective. I called my IT guy, Marcus, who moonlighted doing cybersecurity consulting. "Can you trace these fake reviews?" Already on it, Marcus said. Most of them trace back to the same IP address. Want to guess whose? Janet Sullivan's home address? Bingo. She's not as smart as she thinks she is. While Marcus worked on documenting Janet's cyber harassment, I had a more pressing problem. Isla had apparently spent the night calling everyone we knew, spinning her version of events. My phone was buzzing with concerned friends and family members who'd heard I was abusing my pregnant wife. The most painful call came from my old army buddy, Mike Chen. "Ethan, man, what the hell is going on? Sarah's telling everyone you threw Isla out because she's pregnant." Sarah heard wrong. "So you didn't humiliate her at your mother's birthday party?" "I exposed her affair at my mother's birthday party. There's a difference." Silence. Then, "Affair?" I explained the whole situation. The vasectomy, the impossible pregnancy, the months of cheating. Mike listened without interrupting. "Jesus, Ethan, why didn't you just handle this privately?" "Because she announced her fake pregnancy publicly. She wanted to use my family as witnesses to her lie. She made it public." "But still, man, in front of your mother?" "My mother deserved to know the truth about the woman she welcomed into her family." More silence. "I don't know, bro. This whole thing feels harsh." Harsh. I felt my temper rising. She cheated on me for 6 months. She tried to pass off another man's baby as mine. She lied to everyone who cared about her, but I'm the one being harsh? "I'm just saying, maybe there's a better way to handle this." "Like what? Pretend the baby is mine? Raise Calvin Morrison's kid while my wife continues screwing around behind my back?" "I don't know. Get counseling. Work it out privately." That's when I realized I was losing him. Mike, who'd been my best man at my wedding, who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan with me, was buying into Isla's victim narrative. "Mike, if Sarah cheated on you and tried to pass off another man's baby as yours, what would you do?" Long pause. "That's different." "How is it different?" "Sarah would never do that." "I thought Isla would never do that either. Guess we were both wrong about our wives." The call ended awkwardly, and I knew I'd lost a friend. It wouldn't be the last one. By noon, 3 more old friends had called with similar conversations. By evening, I'd been uninvited from Tom Bradley's barbecue next weekend and removed from our fantasy football group chat. Janet's campaign was working. She was painting me as the villain while positioning Isla as the victim. And people were buying it, but I wasn't going down without a fight. That evening, I drove to Murphy's Tavern. It was Calvin's usual Friday night hangout, and I wanted to have a conversation with him away from his workplace. The bar was crowded, filled with blue-collar workers unwinding after a long week. I spotted Calvin at the pool table, playing with a couple of guys I didn't recognize. He saw me come in, and his face went white. "Calvin," I called out loudly enough for half the bar to hear. "We need to finish our conversation from yesterday." The pool game stopped. Conversations at nearby tables quieted down. Calvin tried to play it cool, but his hands were shaking. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Sure you do. About my wife, about your affair, about the baby she's carrying." The entire bar went silent. Calvin's pool partners stepped back, suddenly very interested in their beer bottles. "You're crazy," Calvin said, but his voice cracked. "Am I? Because I've got security footage from the Riverside Motel that says otherwise. Room 12, twice a week for 6 months. Want me to show everyone?" Calvin dropped his pool cue. "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the video files. March 15th, 3:47 p.m., you and Isla entering room 12 together. March 18th, 2:15 p.m., same room, same couple. Want me to keep going? "Stop," Calvin whispered, but I was just getting started. "The funny thing is, Calvin, I don't think your wife Linda knows about any of this. Does she?" Someone in the crowd whistled low. Another voice said, "Damn, Calvin." "She's pregnant with your baby," I continued. "My wife is carrying your child, and your wife has no idea. How do you think Linda's going to react when she finds out?" Calvin looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to run. The entire bar was staring at him like he was a bug under a microscope. "Please," he said quietly. "Don't involve Linda. She doesn't deserve this." "You're right. She doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve to be married to a cheating piece of garbage who knocks up other men's wives." That's when Calvin snapped. He lunged at me, swinging wildly. I sidestepped easily. He was drunk and emotional, while I was stone-cold sober and trained in hand-to-hand combat. I grabbed his arm, spun him around, and pinned him face-first against the pool table. The bar erupted in cheers and jeers. "Here's what's going to happen, Calvin," I said quietly in his ear. "You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from me. and you're going to figure out how to explain this mess to Linda before someone else does it for you." I let him go and stepped back. Calvin straightened his shirt, trying to salvage some dignity, but it was too late. Everyone in Murphy's Tavern now knew he was a cheating coward who'd gotten his ass handed to him by the husband he'd wronged. As I walked toward the door, someone started clapping. Then someone else joined in. By the time I reached the exit, half the bar was applauding. "That's how you handle a homewrecker," someone shouted. "Should have kicked his ass harder," another voice called out. I drove home feeling better than I had in months. Janet could spread all the rumors she wanted about me being cruel to women. But every man in that bar understood exactly what I'd done and why I'd done it. The war was far from over, but I'd won the first major battle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I texted back, "Was that before or after I made your boyfriend cry in front of 30 witnesses?" No response. But I knew this was just the beginning. Janet and Isla weren't going to give up easily. They'd escalate, try to hit me where it hurt most. I was ready for them. The escalation came sooner than I expected. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find 2 police cars in the parking lot. Detective Ray Morrison, no relation to Calvin, thankfully, was waiting with a warrant. "Ethan, we need to search your office and your home," Ray said apologetically. We'd known each other since high school. "There's been a complaint filed." "What kind of complaint?" "Harassment, stalking, cybercrimes. Someone says you've been threatening them, following them, hacking their social media accounts." I handed him my keys without argument. "Janet Sullivan, right?" Ray nodded. "How'd you know?" "Lucky guess. You'll find everything you need in my desk drawer: security footage, phone records, documentation of the actual harassment I've been receiving." While the police searched my property, I called Tom Bradley, my lawyer friend. Despite the awkwardness over Isla's situation, he was still representing me professionally. "They won't find anything incriminating," I told him. "But Janet's escalating. She's trying to get me arrested." "On what charges?" "Harassment, stalking, cybercrimes. All fabricated, but she's got fake evidence. Screenshots of threatening messages, supposedly from me, probably fake social media accounts, the works." "Can you prove they're fake?" "Marcus can. He's been documenting everything." The police search took 3 hours. They seized my computers, my phone, and several boxes of documents. But they also found the evidence I'd prepared, proof that Janet had been running a coordinated harassment campaign against me and my business. "This is interesting," Detective Morrison said, looking through Marcus's cyber forensics report. "These fake reviews, the threatening messages, they all trace back to the same IP address." "Janet Sullivan's home internet connection," I said. "She's been trying to destroy my business while claiming I'm the one doing the harassing." Ray shook his head. "This is a mess, Ethan. You know that, right?" "I didn't start it." "Maybe not, but you sure as hell escalated it. That scene at Murphy's Tavern, Calvin Morrison filed an assault complaint." "I never touched him except in self-defense. He threw the first punch." "That's what the witnesses say, too. But still, this whole situation is spiraling out of control." After the police left, I sat in my ransacked office and realized Janet had played this perfectly. Even though her complaints were fabricated, the investigation would take weeks. My computers were seized, my business was disrupted, and word would spread that I was under criminal investigation. She was destroying my reputation while playing the victim, but I had one more card to play. That evening, I drove to the community center where the monthly town council meeting was being held. It was a small town tradition. Local residents could address the council about community issues during the public comment period. I'd never spoken at one of these meetings before, but tonight was special. The meeting was packed. Word had gotten around about my situation, and people were curious to see what would happen next. I spotted Isla and Janet sitting in the back row, probably expecting to watch me make a fool of myself. When my turn came, I walked to the podium with a folder full of documents. "Good evening, council members and fellow residents," I began. "My name is Ethan Walker, and I've lived in this community for 15 years. I run Walker Security Services, I'm a veteran, and until recently I was married to Isla Walker." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the usual complaint about potholes or noise ordinances. "Some of you may have heard rumors about my personal life recently, about my marriage, about my wife's pregnancy, about various conflicts around town. I'm here tonight to set the record straight." I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. "This is a medical record from Dr. Patterson's office, dated 5 years ago. It documents a vasectomy procedure that rendered me permanently sterile." More murmurs. I could see Isla sinking lower in her seat. "This is a paternity test completed yesterday, showing that I am not the biological father of the child my wife is carrying? The murmurs turned to gasps. Someone in the front row said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. This is security footage from the Riverside Motel, showing my wife entering room 12 with Calvin Morrison on 17 different occasions over the past 6 months. The room erupted. People were turning in their seats, looking for Isla and Calvin. Janet was frantically whispering in Isla's ear, probably telling her to leave. But I wasn't done. "And this," I said, holding up Marcus's cyber forensics report, "is documentation showing that Janet Sullivan has been conducting a coordinated harassment campaign against my business, using fake social media accounts to post defamatory reviews and send threatening messages." Janet shot to her feet. "That's a lie. The police have the evidence, Janet. IP addresses, timestamps, metadata. All traced back to your home computer." "You bastard." "Ma'am," the council chairman interrupted. "Please maintain decorum or you'll be asked to leave." I turned back to the crowd. "I'm not here looking for sympathy or vindication. I'm here because this community deserves to know the truth. For the past week, I've been painted as a villain, as someone who cruelly abandoned his pregnant wife. But the reality is that I'm a man who discovered his wife's affair and refused to be victimized by it." The room was completely silent now. You could hear the air conditioning humming. I exposed the affair publicly because my wife chose to announce her pregnancy publicly at my mother's birthday party in front of my family and friends. She wanted to use my loved ones as witnesses to her deception. She made it a public matter. I looked directly at Isla. "I don't regret what I did. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the woman I loved and trusted chose to betray that trust, but I don't regret refusing to be her victim." I closed the folder and stepped back from the podium. "If you're going to make me the villain in this story, I'll wear that title with pride, because sometimes the villain is just the hero of a different story. Thank you." The applause started slowly, just 1 or 2 people clapping. Then it spread, growing louder and more sustained. Within seconds, 3/4 of the room was applauding. Isla was crying. Janet was furious. Calvin, who I hadn't noticed before, was trying to sneak out the back door. But I just stood there, taking in the moment when the truth finally came out, when the lies and manipulation and victim playing finally crumbled under the weight of evidence. As I walked back to my seat, people reached out to shake my hand, to pat my shoulder, to whisper words of support. These were my neighbors, my community, people who'd known me for years. They knew who I really was. After the meeting, as people filed out, my mother approached me. She'd been sitting in the 3rd row, watching everything with her usual stoic expression. "Your father would be proud," she said simply. "Thanks, Mom. That girl never deserved you." "I know." As we walked toward the parking lot, I saw Isla standing by her car, alone. Janet had apparently abandoned her, and Calvin was nowhere to be seen. She looked broken, defeated, utterly alone. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Ethan," she called out as I passed. "Can we talk? Please?" I stopped and turned to face her one last time. "There's nothing left to say, Isla. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yes, you did. Every choice you made, every lie you told, every time you met Calvin at that motel, you meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught." She was crying again, but I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just emptiness where my love for her used to be. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. "That's not my problem anymore." I walked away and didn't look back. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Isla moved back in with her parents. Calvin's wife, Linda, divorced him and took half of everything he owned, including his precious Camaro. Janet lost her job at the marketing firm after her cyber harassment campaign became public knowledge. As for me, my business actually grew. Turns out there's a market for a security consultant who doesn't back down from a fight. The story of how I exposed my wife's affair became local legend, and people respected the fact that I'd stood up for myself. I never remarried, never wanted to, but I built a good life, surrounded by people who knew my worth and respected my integrity. Sometimes being the villain is just another way of being the hero.